Abdi Hersy, who became famous on social media, particularly YouTube under the name Sheikh Abdi Hersy, portrays himself as a religious figure who brings good messages to the Somali people. However, it is well known that the messages he shares on YouTube seem to be focused on further dividing the Somali community, which has long been struggling with corruption and internal conflicts. Now, let's take a closer look at this so-called Sheikh Abdi Hersy. He lived in the United States, specifically in Woodbury, Minnesota, where he worked as a respiratory therapist before moving to Canada in recent years. It is important to note that he left the United States after being accused of raping two women who were unconscious and being treated in the ICU. When his case began, he fled to Canada. Let's watch a segment from the Canadian CBC News about his case.
CBC News has learned Hersy is a wanted man in the U.S. He's facing 6 charges of criminal sexual conduct and criminal abuse. The 46-year-old is accused of fondling female patients when he worked as a respiratory therapist in Woodbury, Minnesota in 2006. Hersy was fired from his job in Woodbury in late 2006. The Minnesota Board of Medical Practice also stripped him of his registration to practice in the state. Shortly after he lost his job, Hersy drove from Minnesota to Windsor, Ontario. He spent a few months in Ontario where he applied for refugee status, claiming torture or death if he was sent to his homeland in Somalia. Hersy then moved to Alberta.
When Abdi moved to Canada, he settled in Windsor, Ontario, where he was granted residency in 2008. Abdi was granted residency in Canada after he claimed that he would be killed if deported to Somalia. At that time, the situation in Somalia was extremely volatile, especially in the capital, Mogadishu, due to the presence of Ethiopian troops who had invaded the country. More to the point, he also mentioned that he belongs to a minority group in Somalia. This conflict significantly heightened fears for personal safety, which likely influenced the Canadian government's decision to approve his asylum claim. In 2010, he moved to Calgary, where he found a job as an imam at a mosque. However, he was later dismissed from that position after the community in Calgary learned about the rape allegations against him in the United States. Let's watch what the Calgary Muslim Council had to say about him.
In 2008, Abdi Hersy was granted refugee protection. He eventually moved to Calgary, and in 2010, he was hired as an imam by the Muslim Council of Calgary.
I know nothing about him. He just came from nowhere.
The Muslim Council says Hersy never really fit in. His messages were not well received at the council's mosques and musallas in Calgary. It says it made a mistake by not doing a more thorough background check. The MCC fired Hersy last year after learning about the charges in the U.S.
Despite many people believing he was a sheikh, this man is wanted in the United States, where he faces accusations of raping two women who were in the ICU for emergency medication.